You? Damn.
All right, everybody. Sorry for starting a little bit late. I had some trouble with the maple syrup in the fridge, so
The day of the Rick approaches.
Either way. So tonight, of course, we're going to be talking about the shenanigans that China and Russia's been they've been getting up to in recent weeks or recent months, rather. I'm going to more or less just be talking about a geopolitical analysis. That's going to be the meat and bones of the show tonight. However, I also, since there have been a couple of interesting developments that have gone on over the past week or two, I feel like it would be probably a good idea just to briefly go over those, maybe over the course of the first 30 minutes. I'm gonna hold to that, only 30 minutes, and then we'll of course get into the more geopolitical things. But the first two orders of business that I really wanted to just briefly touch on, just a lightning speed round. Number one, the George Floyd trial going on. Well, the one for Derek Chauvin, number one, and number two, Matt Gaetz. Yeah. Which one would you guys? Pardon?
Oh, can we talk about Matt Gaetz? Fuck yeah.
Yeah, no. We're gonna start by just going over the George Floyd thing right now. Like you know how Derek Chauvin is currently having his trial.
Yeah.
So lightning round, one by one. Well, first of all, we need to do introductions. Hi, everybody. As you know, I'm the Politicrat. I'm currently working on the 12th step. No. Okay. Anyway, so Grayson, let's start with you, Grayson. How are you doing, Grayson? You were here last time, right? For some reason, it feels like you haven't been here in a while, yet I think you were on last time.
I've been here quite a few times. I'm Grayson. I run the YouTube channel Hungry Country Ball, very foreign policy oriented. We talked a little bit about China on that show. And I guess if you want me to make an identification, I guess I would say I'm a neoconservative grifter.
Yeah, you were a paleocon like 2 months ago, so and now you're a neocon. So, yeah. Anyway, so next we have Lou Bempler, whatever, Cringe Walker. We have Cringe Walker here.
Why doesn't anyone know what Anglo-Saxon alphabet looks like?
Well, I do, but I know what an Anglo-Saxon alphabet looks like, but I just don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay. It's a TH. Anyway, hello.
So Cringe Walker. Okay.
Otherwise known as Cringe Walker, which I don't know if I'll get rid of that name or not, but I'm one of the three hosts of the Foundations podcast for architecture, occasional super chatter of things.
Okay. Next we have returning Alkazai. Feels like you haven't been here in a while.
Oh, it's been quite a while, but I've you all know who I am. I'm the racist Democrat. I'm a friend of the channel.
I am too.
And LSP. I think this is only your second time back here. I think your first time was the democracy debate back in October.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That was awful.
Yeah, that one with the argument that democracy can't survive in France because of the Muslims.
I don't think that was only a small part of it. But either way, welcome everybody to the Political Pigpen. We can start out by what would you guys rather start with? Talking about the whole George Floyd, Derek Chauvin thing, or
I mean, I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it. I mean, I just think he's guilty, but I can elaborate a little bit if you want me to.
Well, I'll start by saying I think it's either going to be third-degree murder or manslaughter. I don't think
he'll be convicted on all counts, but he'll be convicted at least one or two of them.
On one of those, yeah. Like I don't think that he's going to. I don't think they're going to let him off. I think that
there's the really if I'm going to be honest, I don't think he intended to kill George Floyd. I just think he was extremely reckless.
I don't know if I agree with that.
And it's like so. I mean, what I don't understand is the people who are basically like, oh no. This is kind of what's funny. They're like, oh no, he didn't kill him. It was the fentanyl. It's like, okay, yeah, that's what the autopsy showed, but does that fucking justify what he did. It's like you're completely
But to be
erasing
clear, the
that part.
autopsy never said the fentanyl killed him. In fact,
No, what it was no. So what I believe it was the neck on the knee on the neck isn't what killed him, but what happened is that basically exasperated or ended up triggering like heart related stuff because he was also on fentanyl at the same time. So it more or less was a trigger or a stimulus, and so by that account, I would say that qualifies easily third-degree murder because he was still intending harm. And either way, like, I mean, how is he to know that he also had drugs in his system? But at the same time, that's his fault for going to, or Chauvin's fault for going to that extreme. And it's like, okay, you killed this guy. This is all on you, buddy.
I couldn't disagree harder with these takes. Like, I think you can call. I don't think you can say it's negligence after like the second minute of kneeling on him. He was on him for like what, 9 minutes. And
yeah, I mean, so obviously, which is why I think he should probably get a murder charge.
And there was also the testimony the other day from the I don't even remember who it was, or was it today? The guy who was like he was like examining the footage and observing like Chauvin's position, right? And so one of his feet were off the ground so that he could put more weight into the neck, right? That has to be a conscious, deliberate choice. You know, it's not like he lost his balance for him, and it's like if his foot's off the ground, he's making a deliberate choice to knee into the neck.
Well, all I'm getting at here is the drugs in his system. That's completely irrelevant because either way, Chauvin was responsible for whether it was asphyxiation, responsible for that, or for triggering the heart problems that were exacerbated by the drugs. Either way, whether or not he was on drugs, it's pretty much irrelevant because Chauvin still did what he did. So
yeah.
And I don't like how the conservatives are basically, you have like the right now, they're trying to deflect and putting it on the drugs. It's like that's like it doesn't really matter because regardless of whether he was or whether he wasn't, Chauvin's basically that was a stimulus that provided a stimulus that,
I mean, even so, it was still very possible to kill George Floyd even without those drugs. Probably.
Yeah, exactly, which is why it's not. I don't think that part's particularly irrelevant.
The video also showed him moving around a lot, though. Not doing that.
And also, the video shows that he wasn't putting distributing any of the weight onto the car, onto the ground.
Yeah.
So, like, he had both knees on him, right? If he had one knee on George Floyd and one knee on the ground, right, he has a better case. But no, he had both knees on and wasn't leaning on the car very much. So, like, all of his weight was on George Floyd's neck and upper back.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it wasn't only the neck. He moved around a lot, which is why I think they're going to end up arguing that caused his heart to fail under an OD rather than asphyxiation. Because it makes a lot more sense that doing that would trigger. I don't know if you guys remember, but during the trial it was mentioned he had, I think he has like he has a heart condition, and so if you have a heart conditioning while you're ODing, and like it's not the knee on the neck, it's the knee on the back that's preventing his heart from beating. I think you're gonna see the trial sort of shift to the induced heart failure rather than the lack of oxygen. Lack of oxygen was because his heart wasn't beating, not because he couldn't breathe. Although I think he's only going to get manslaughter, if anything. Just because like he's already been in. Technically, he's been in jail for like 1 year under the trial. Although he's been like obviously out on bail, but what's probably going to happen is that what's like this kind of murder. I think you get like 2 or 3 years for this kind of murder. I forget which degree it is.
No, you get at least like 5-10 years, right?
Not for cops. He'll probably get 3 to 5 years with like 1 year served already from the sentence because he's technically been locked up, although he's already paid bail.
For murder?
Yeah, welcome to America, buddy.
Manslaughter.
Not murder. Yeah, he's gonna get manslaughter probably. Just as like a token. I mean, one of the big hints that this is all kind of staged is what happened with his wife, I think. Where like 3 days later his wife divorced him but didn't file for like dividing the assets, which kind of suggests that
well, according to Google, first degree manslaughter can range up to 15 years in prison, up to $30,000 fines, or both. In most cases, defendant will only serve 7 to 10 years in prison. So
7. Oh, that's interesting. I guess maybe I'm confused. I don't know if it's
like
the
I
same.
mean, even if you're a cop, man, and like you're cop found abusing your power, like that's different than just like
Yeah.
being,
Oh well, sucks to be him.
I don't know. Maybe I'm optimistic or whatever.
Yeah, I don't see any of the murder charges being filed because I forget. Does the law say intent to do harm or intent to kill? Because that's a big difference in legal speak.
Yeah,
If it's intent to do, if the law says like degrees of murder or intent to kill, then he's not getting any murder charges because he clearly was not intending to kill the man. He was intending to do harm.
Again, hard disagree.
Right.
He tried to plead guilty to a murder charge before the Justice Department stepped in and tabled the plea agreement that he worked out. Like, I think even he understands, like, he fucked up. And I don't think it's manslaughter. Like, elsewise, why would you plead guilty to it?
Because you get a lower sentence, and that's how you get, like, I forget how that works, but you get, like, a lower
If he thought he could win on a manslaughter, I think he would have, like, pleaded not guilty. He pleaded guilty.
Was the manslaughter charge part of that? Which plea did he plead guilty to, or try to plead guilty to?
Tried to plead guilty to a murder charge. Yeah.
I don't feel like this is much of a lightning round.
Sorry.
Guilty.
Oh, I'll give it another 2 minutes, and then we can try to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it all depends on why he was trying. Because one of these charges, I think you get like not many years if you plead guilty, but I forget. New York is also, I guess, a little different. That's where I am.
I'll drop it in the StreamYard. You can read the article if whenever you want.
Are these state charges or federal charges? I haven't paid attention enough.
State.
Okay, that's a bit different. Interesting, actually. I would have expected. So even if he walks free, he might get federal charges after that. Then, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, because like you can go up to state. I think so. In other words, he's gonna get something because if the state doesn't charge him, the federal government will charge him under Biden, just to stop the riots.
Here's a real hot question. All right, I want to see who here has balls. How justified would riots be if they return a no bill or not guilty?
I don't think riots are ever justifiable.
If they would
I think they're going to riot no matter what he gets anyway. They're going to find some kind of an excuse to do it.
I'll put it this way. If he goes free, the rioters will be black. If he goes to jail, the rioters will be white. And not in the sense of them being right or left wing. I mean like Antifa versus BLM.
What does that mean?
Either way, though.
Well, the Antifa rioters are always white, and the BLM rioters are always black. So Antifa will find a reason to riot. BLM will only riot.
And then no matter what, both sides, the media is going to, like, whichever side ends up rioting, either the right wing or the left wing media, whichever applies, is going to come up with some kind of story about how the other side infiltrated the riot.
It's not even worth debating. Someone will everyone's going to play their typical political rank punditry. It's not even worth arguing the point because it's like it's like the debate is already there and will just reach its natural conclusion.
So now that we've kind of just covered briefly the whole George Floyd situation going on, we are now going to be moving on to something that's a little fun. Hold on a second. I think we all kind of know about this. Our friend Matt Gaetz.
Oh.
So, does anyone besides me, does anyone care to kind of I don't know, I kind of want to see how either Alkazai or Cringe Volker
I just want to say this. So Matt Gaetz, he's being charged with sex trafficking and like having sex with a 17-year-old, right?
Yeah.
I did Q is the 17th letter in the alphabet. Take it.
Oh, fuck's sake!
That's all I'm gonna say.
Interesting.
Sorry.
It's like Q. Oh no, I was about to say Q. X-Files theme.
You can no longer say that letter on YouTube without something triggering. Just say What's the number letter it was?
I can
17.
never see a Quiznos logo without thinking of pedophilia ever again.
We'll just say the 17th letter. Just keep it like that. And I will point out that the person who started this investigation was A.G. Barr.
That is actually amazing.
So what that means is that Donnie O'Boy got to meet and know Gates and campaigned for him, and then after, like, even before the election, basically went home from like the campaign trail, called up Mr. A.G. Barr, was like, "Hey, A.G., I know I just like campaigned for this guy, but something don't sit right. Investigate this guy."
And then wasn't he like, I don't know. Do you think there could be a link between Gates and Epstein?
Of course.
Yeah, I think so.
He's
too.
literally like on the express route from Florida to the island.
That's yeah.
He's
That's,
probably the midway point or something.
do you think he's gonna end up and then didn't he like adopt some little Mexican boy or something? And
No.
Yeah.
Really?
yeah.
He had a manservant from I thought it was a Puerto Rican or something.
Oh yeah, it's something like that. And then
Oh, whoa!
but
You're
he's
not confusing Puerto Rican and Mexican here, are you?
no, it was some Latin American.
Isn't Gates Latin American, like fake white Latin American?
He is. We reject them.
I don't know, then again, it was some Latin American country. I
I thought it was Cuba. Wait, are you talking about his like
I think
the
it was Cuba.
his ward, quote unquote.
the weird the boy he
His-
adopted or whatever?
His squire.
His squire,
Yeah, the kid he quote unquote adopted.
his Latino squire. Yes.
Yeah, he's from Cuba. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Well, it is Florida, so that does make sense.
Well, he's not
But-
even from Miami. He's from like Pensacola, I think. Oh no, he's from Celebration, Florida.
Why would you
What
guys-
a name. What a name.
I mean,
Wait,
Matt
that's
Gates-
what the
Matt
Truman
Gates-
Show was said. He grew up in the Truman Show house.
Have y'all been keeping up with his alibi? Like y'all?
Oh,
no, what is
let me
that?
hear.
No.
Let me hear his cope. Let me hear.
Oh, it's beautiful. Basically, him and his father are victims of an undercover extortion scheme from the FBI, and they've been wearing wires to assist the FBI in solving these crimes. So he's an undercover agent for the FBI. I shit you not. This was his story. And these charges are political retribution against him for getting too close to the truth.
Jesus
About
Christ.
Q?
Yeah, he literally says he's like, hang on, him or his father was like wearing a wire, and he's working with the FBI, and this was just an extortion scheme he was working to find out or something like that.
Oh the.
By the way,
stories
I
you can tell.
Here, I got it. Mr. Gates called the investigation part of an elaborate scheme involving false sex allegations to extort him and his family for $25 million that began this month. He said he and his father, Don Gates, had been cooperating with the FBI and wearing a wire after they were approached by people saying they could make the investigation go away. Mr. Gates claimed the discourse of the sex trafficking inquiry was intended to thwart the investigation into an extortion plot. So he's an undercover FBI agent, is his story.
I again, there are very few times where I'm going to trust Trump, but the fact Trump called this investigation on him before the election, before he was even out.
Well, was it
So
Trump? Or
I
was it-
doubt Trump called this He couldn't get an investigation into Hillary Clinton. He would never.
AG Barr, that was all cope from him.
Yeah.
AG Barr started this investigation, and as far as we know, Trump was aware of it because Trump was like, he has to get updates from AG Barr's investigations. I think, or maybe they keep him private, actually. I don't know.
I don't
Well,
know. I can't imagine the attorney general is going to go to the president with an investigation into a political ally. At least I would hope not. But fuck.
I mean,
Well, I
knowing-
mean, Trump had to know though, right?
I have no clue.
Wait, no, Trump did know because Matt Gates asked him for a preemptive pardon, and Trump said, "Fuck off."
Yeah, but that
No,
doesn't.
no,
mean-
he asked him for a
that doesn't
preemptive
mean-
blanket pardon in November.
Yeah,
So
but that
yeah,
doesn't mean
Trump
that
knew.
Trump knew like that Gates was under investigation necessarily.
Well,
Oh.
Gates by many are Gates is considered like the only alternative to Cruz in 2024. So like if Trump preferred him to Cruz, he would have gone along with that. I think.
Wait,
I thought
it
Haley
was
had a big chance
Also,
potentially.
By the
Haley,
way-
well, actually, isn't it like the big one other than Trump? Isn't that like Ron DeSantis is like the big one?
Yeah, I think you're confusing Gates with DeSantis. I mean, they're both
Maybe.
Florida men, and Florida is objectively the worst state. And Matt Gates is yet more proof. Like,
Yeah, by the way, no.
Florida's
What's
the
really
worst
funny?
state.
So,
Florida.
no fun fact about Matt Gates' grandfather. In 1964, at the North Dakota Republican Convention, when he was being nominated for lieutenant governor, he walked up to the stage of the convention, had a heart attack, and fucking died on live.
Really?
Yeah, here,
A
let me
curse.
send you the link.
A curse upon his generation to the third generation.
It's actually insane. Wow.
What wizard cursed this family? I want to know.
Yeah, because his dad's actually from North Dakota, although Gates was born in Florida.
No. Well, yeah, that's yeah. No, but the originally my thought was, okay, if Matt Gates actually did this, that's crazy. However, Occam's razor would suggest that what he's doing is probably just on the edge of legality. So like something that is not quite illegal, but that is embarrassing enough to want to keep covered. However, at this point, I'm like, no, fuck. It's like straight up illegal.
Also, I have to ask, how are the Q people reacting to this?
They died.
Q's gone. Is it
Q
basically dead?
died. Q fucking died, man.
What do you
Like,
mean?
when was the last time you heard of some Q conspiracy? Like the last time Q posted on 4chan was like, I think back in like October or some shit.
Well, no, because because all the Q people said Trump was going to come back and be president on March 4th.
In August. No. Mike Lindell. Everyone's the my pillow guy. Yeah, no, he thinks Trump's coming. Trump is coming back in August. Like he said it exactly like Trump is actually going
because I have to ask, like, are they going to admit, Matt Gates is part of the satanic pedophile cult, or like, is this a smear from the deep state? Like,
He was actually a Democrat all along. That's what they're gonna say.
Yeah, if he's guilty, he was a Democrat. If he's innocent, he ain't doing nothing wrong.
No, dude. His grandfather knew about Q 50 years before it was going to come to light, so they had to kill him. They had
My favorite Q conspiracy theory is that it's actually Q's actually led by JFK Jr., who's still very much alive. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
He was actually led by some Indian guy.
Anyway,
Yeah.
does anybody have any sort of last minute comments about Gatesagate?
Yeah, all the memes from this are hilarious, and everyone should check them out.
What memes? Send me some memes, LFP.
Well, those like pictures of Gates like posing with a bunch of like, oh, I really enjoyed my stop at such and such high
yeah.
school. Pictures with these girls, and it's like,
enjoyed lunch today at such and such high school. I'm like, oh my god.
There's one where he's like talking about a date he was on with Tucker Carlson.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah. Well, tell everyone then.
Oh my god, is Gates single?
No. Okay, no. So basically what happened was, he tried to deflect when he was on an interview with Tucker Carlson. I think this was maybe a little over a week ago. And what was it? He tried to deflect and was like, "Oh, but Tucker Carlson, you need to remember you were like accused of these things too." And he was like, "Well, not to this level. I was accused, like," and he was like, "Rightly so. I was accused of saying stuff on like a shock jock like thing, and that was all like that's done and past." And then he was like, "Oh, but remember when we met for dinner together, my wife and your wife, we met for dinner." And then I think he said something, "We saw each other at a restaurant and you insisted that we push our tables together." Something like that. And apparently afterwards Tucker Carlson came out and said that was the weirdest interview I've ever had.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
Again, I have to point to the fact that Trump started this investigation, so I'm pretty high confidence that this motherfucker is a pedophile.
It's probably, yeah.
By the way, the Democrats in the midterm should hold this over the Republicans' heads.
But like, why? Because to be fair, the mainstream Republican Party probably would suffer from that, but like the Trumpers would be like, "Hey, we started this investigation."
Well, whatever. They'll just get more backlash from the suburbs, which is all I care about.
Yeah. Anyway, let us move on to the meat and bone. Unless, does anybody have any last things to say about Matt Gaetz?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, I that would be funny. I mean, this is like some for life shit.
I might have a third topic to quickly do a lightning round on, if you mind, but maybe not.
What depends? What is it?
Alex Jones physically stopping a pedophile ring with his massive bulk body, stepping in front of a car.
You briefly go over that.
Or,
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Either yesterday or 2 years ago, I forget because it was late night when I saw it. But our everyone's favorite frog denier decided to visit one of these overflow facilities on the border, and while he was there, he visited a Catholic mission, and he found this random bloke just like shoving his SUV full of kids, like unironically just like shoving like half a dozen kids into his tiny car. And Alex Jones was like, "Where are you taking these kids? I demand to know. Who are you? Who's your official?" And the guy was like, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. So Alex Jones physically puts himself in front of the car and like man hugs the car and starts pushing the car with his bulk masculinity. I'm just like, I'm not letting you take these kids. And he got his producer to grab the cops and start investigating what happened. And apparently, like it might have been some kind of illegal child smuggling ring that he just stumbled into.
Hero then.
What?
Alex Jones is a hero.
Oh, that's a bit of a far call. For all we know, he was just like stopping like a doctor. For all we know, we don't know anything. But it was always fun to watch Mr. Jones unveil his true energy form, whatever you call it, and just like go full macho on the car.
All that brain force.
Okay,
Jones, sometimes his stupidity saves us.
All right, so we're done with that. We're going to move on to the actual meat and grits of the episode, which is, for the most part, talking about China and Russia. Basically, they've been up to some shenanigans lately. We're going to be talking about the basically what's been going on there, from both the actual stuff behind the scenes to the optics in general, just how it seems. And I think, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about that. I mean, I've really only started reading about it today, but it seems more what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It just seems more intriguing than things that they've been doing lately. And then India is somehow involved too. And I just, long story short, I get the sense that Russia is kind of trying to decide whether they want to distance themselves from Beijing or if they want to sort of slide into the West's DMs via India. But yeah, we'll discuss that in a moment. But what would you guys rather start by talking about, China or Russia? Because with China, I think the starting point for that conversation is going to be their shenanigans in the South China Sea, which could eventually lead to. There are speculations that they're going to try to
invade Taiwan.
Go
take a vacation in Taiwan.
I think. I don't know if you've heard too about that situation in Myanmar, where like apparently I think I heard they're sending troops to like protect some oil gas thing.
I do think that a lot of the context in Russia requires first going over China.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the whole Myanmar thing. I forget what stream it was, but I think most people, both on the left and the right on that stream, more or less agreed in the end that democracy was never going to work in Myanmar to begin with. But either way, I think we should start with China. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
sure. Let's talk about whatever. What is it? Let's talk about the Qing Dynasty.
Okay. Hold on. So we're just going to watch at least part of this video to start Beijing. Okay.
We're here!
Don't settle for the
one estimate.
presence in the South China Sea. The Chinese government has maneuvered hundreds of militia ships into the disputed waters, effectively blocking access for the maritime activities of other nations. A report in the New York Times says China is attempting to, quote, accomplish by overwhelming presence what it has been unable to do through diplomacy or international law. China's recent moves come after they built and fortified with military bases a series of man-made islands in the region starting in 2014. They did so despite competing claims from Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Vietnam. The U.S. has no official position on territorial claims in the South China Sea, but
Why?
has criticized China's tactics.
Gee, I wonder.
U.S. Navy warships have been
Because we're
dispatched
committed
to
to a
patrol the area
1970
3
something agreement
times since
for a
President
one-China
Biden
policy.
took office. The New York Times Beijing bureau chief Stephen Lee Myers joins me now from Seoul,
Okay.
South Korea.
But
Thank
that
you very
commitment's
much,
like
Stephen,
a
for being with
wink
I
commitment.
think we can pretty much stop at that point. And in the meantime, we got some shenanigans going on with Russia as well, as we know. Hold on. So actually, no, should we comment on the video? Do you think video first, or should we just go over both China and
I
Russia?
don't care. Let's talk about China.
Okay. Regarding China, what do you think that their next move is? Do you think that this is just China being China, or do you think this is part of some sort of, or do you think they're going to do something in the coming year?
They're obviously planning on doing something. They wouldn't spend all those billions of dollars for ships if they weren't.
Well, I mean, what they're doing is just building up a military presence to secure trade routes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that complicated.
Well, usually the U.S. policy, if I remember correctly, has basically been to ignore China whenever they get angry. Like U.S. will fly bombers over the area or send a ship through, and China will be like, "How dare you? You're infiltrating our waters!" Blah 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 blah. And the U.S. policy has just been to just like hang up, and like what? Like China can't do anything, right? So China just like files a complaint, and then they drop a few more soldiers on an island that can't shoot, and all kinds of stuff like that. And then basically U.S. policy has just been like, fuck off, I don't care. That may now be forced to be questioned if there's so many ships in the waters. There is going to be some kind of confrontation there eventually.
Yeah.
Now, you can see this is like prime opportunity like in this kind of situation where two superpowers can't touch each other but want to. That's usually a pretty strong demand for a supply of something akin to privateers to do the operations for you.
Is that what the militia ships are, more or less?
Probably.
Dude.
It
Oh my
looks,
god, who wants to become a privateer with me? Raise a tiny ship.
well, because you saw earlier a few years ago, you saw China attempt to do this by pulling the Philippines away from the U.S. sphere of influence, and like if you could like get the Filipinos to harass the Americans, maybe something could be like. They could ward them off, but the Filipinos, like, they said a lot, but they didn't do anything because ultimately their economy is dependent on the U.S. So China's main problem is that they can't find any privateers to do their dirty business because they're kind of the enemy of everyone in the region. Because obviously these waters are claimed by multiple nations, and basically China has essentially run out of friends, and so they have to do it themselves. But they can't. So maybe they'll get some like angry peasants to, like ride boats and yell at American ships. You see the problem.
But they technically kind of do that with their fishermen. Like, I don't know if you've heard the stories about where they have literally sent fishers just around the Galapagos Islands.
Yeah, but the difference is Argentina opens fire on those ships and doesn't give a shit. Like a lot of Latin American countries don't have the like expectations of professionalism that the U.S. does, and they'll just straight up like fire around at the Chinese ships and tell them to fuck off.
Yeah, I think Paraguay doesn't even recognize PLC. So
there is no nation with a concrete territorial claim that would be considered legitimate over the South China Sea, which is a little bit it's part of the reason why China is like able to impose itself there so effectively.
Yeah.
And even if there were a legitimate claim, the nations of Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, none of these nations present enough hard power that they would be able to do anything against China anyway.
Well, each one is an opportunity for the Americans to play the hero, and China doesn't like that.
I'm not sure we would.
We have this started under Obama, but Obama started building a ring of fire around China. Basically, the plan was
that's what TPP was initially supposed. TPP was designed as a means to counteract Chinese expansion, which is why. Okay, so I don't dislike Tim Pool. I mean I don't like him nearly as much as I used to. But
you still that implies you still like him.
Well, I mean, okay, I think this is not about Tim Pool. Plus, anyway, He said something that was probably the cringiest take that he's ever had. Was when he said, he was like, "I don't like Donald Trump, but at least he got us out of the TPP because that was basically selling the U.S. out to China." It's like, no,
Holy
Tim,
shit.
you have no idea what the TPP is, do you?
Most people don't.
Like, that's like a Kyle Kalinske level big brain take. But yeah, but either way, yeah. And then Trump's like, okay, so I'm not a fan of tariffs or trade wars, of course. However, Trump just trades a smart big brained, like actual big brain. I don't mean that in the ironic sense, but an actual long-term strategy, aka the TPP, for 18th century style mercantilism, aka the tariffs with the trade wars and everything. And honestly, I would have probably warmed up to the trade war with China had he not also declared trade wars on Canada and Mexico and Europe and every country except every country except Israel, I think.
Saudi Arabia.
Big thing.
And Saudi Arabia, yeah.
Saudi Arabia kill a journalist, and we're like, well, gas is cheap.
Yeah.
Kind of a dick.
Yeah. But either way, yeah. And I heard something about Biden's not even planning on. Was it Biden's not planning on getting back into the TPP? Oh no. He wasn't planning on getting back to the Iran nuclear deal. That's what it was.
He is opening up relations with Iran.
Yeah,
though.
I thought he was committed to re-engaging with the nuclear deal. He just wanted to incentivize Iran to come back to the table. I thought it was Iran that wasn't committed to the deal anymore.
It was something. I mean, but it was Trump who got us out of the deal in the first place. I know.
Yeah, he's an idiot.
Yeah, but either way, were you saying something, Cringe Walker?
I'm mixed feelings on these things. I do think it was kind of cringe that we were paying Iran money, but it was like, it was kind of like it's a carrot on a stick solution.
No, we weren't paying Iran money. We unfroze their own money. This is assets they already owned. We didn't give them a check. We
froze the assets back in '79.
And then we unfroze them.
If you put your money into a foreign bank, the bank owns it. It's not your you call it your asset, fine, but it's the bank's property.
Okay. Point is,
I mean, not
taxpayers anything. Money.
There were reasons to keep those things sealed.
Well, no. The whole point of the sanctions was to get them to the negotiating table. They're at the negotiating table. They're not going to negotiate if you keep the sanctions on.
I guess it's just Iran is current. I think it would be easier to follow. It would be better to try and support more liberalizing factions in Iran than it is to try to convince the conservative faction to do anything.
I mean, baby steps. Let's deal with the nuke first. I don't disagree, but deal with the nuke, the nuclear.
Well, even that, I'm not entirely convinced that Iran having a nuke is the worst thing in the world. It would guarantee there will be no war, and it would force both powers to deal with.
You can make the argument that it would reduce power imbalance in the region, especially with Israel. You can make that argument. You can make that argument. However, I mean, I don't necessarily think that that's the safest way to go, but it is
also,
a valid
technically,
argument.
I don't think that fundamentalist government necessarily does apply to them because
well, the thing about Iran is that it's not only a fundamentalist government. Iran is functionally a power balance between three factions: the theocrats, the liberals, and the communists. And that balance is actually remarkably stable in Iran. And so you're not going to see the theocrats go like apocalyptic with the nukes, because the liberals and the communists will take over if they do. There's a nice power balance native in Iran that doesn't need our interference.
I thought the communists were like a fringe movement in Iran that was opposing the government.
I don't know that the Tudeh party has any relevance anymore in Iran.
I'm not talking about not formal political parties, just like the way in which ideologies work in the country.
After Iran seized power in '79, they did a pretty systemic and large-scale massacre of the party's leftists.
Yeah.
And also, you guys are assuming that Iran is a completely rational actor, which is Not always.
He assumes that. He assumes that.
The
I don't
theocrats.
believe in nuclear peace theory first and foremost, but I definitely don't believe in it with a fundamentalist Islamic nation like Iran.
Well, yeah, I
the
didn't talk about
theocrats
that.
aren't going to be sane, of course, but they're not the only ones in power.
Who else shares power in Iran?
Yeah, who else is in power?
Like it's
I'm
run by
confused.
it's the Ayatollah.
Yeah, that's one branch of government. Iran has multiple like
Ayatollah is
ideologies.
I mean, in theory, maybe.
I just feel like you guys are
It's
confusing.
kind of like how Romania, communist Romania, in theory, there were other factions other than Ceausescu, but it was really just Ceausescu.
Yeah, this is why I reject this. They had a reformist president in the 90s named Abdullah Khatani or something like that. I don't remember his name. I got to go look it up. This person was threatened to be ousted by the Quds Force General Qasem Soleimani, who Trump later killed, because he was instituting like leftist reforms, which included like expanded political freedoms. This was in response to student protests, where a bunch of students were like dragged out by secret police and beaten.
Yeah,
Like,
I know these like one-off incidents from like decades ago. I get it, but like things have been changing over those decades.
But here's one thing though. I should probably say relating to Iran, and I have no idea. Like, I mean, I know I cited the sources, and when I was on, I think I was on one of Castley's streams, and I cited empirical studies showing this, but he refused to believe me. Called it propaganda, but it was the fact that Iran's population has like public opinion in Iran is higher towards the United States or more favorable towards the United States than the average Islamic nation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to remember that the Iranian people, they love the U.S. The government hates the U.S. It's the other way around in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi government loves the U.S., but the people not so much.
Yeah, like I'm gonna. It's a hot take, but I view Iran as a more trustworthy ally than Saudi Arabia.
Oh, for sure.
And
For sure.
yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I mean, not at the moment, but I think they have the potential to be.
I
potentially, but that's like
all I'm saying is that the religious faction in Iran is pretty easy to appease, and they won't do as much if you just like appease them in little ways. Because the liberal faction is definitely bigger in Iran.
I say just restore the Sassanians.
Sure. Not untrue. But like I mean, I certainly don't like. We've already seen the murder and mayhem that the Saudi-Israeli alliance does in the region. Like, why would you want to be associated with these people? I would pick Iran any day.
A state sponsor of terror supporting the Houthis of Yemen.
Yeah,
and
Iran is the largest state
Iraq
sponsor.
and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Like,
Again, I'm gonna admit it. I understand where they're coming from. Like, I understand Hezbollah a lot more than their reasons for doing things than I do for like Israel.
Oh yeah, Iran is no saint. I mean, far from. They are, like, again, as LSP said, the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
I would say we are, but
okay, Noam Chomsky.
No, like, I mean, you can't like topple all these governments and cause a resurrection of a slave trade through half of Africa and call yourself the moral high ground.
That
like,
wasn't the U.S. didn't overthrow Gaddafi. We just only helped. That wasn't the U.S.
Well, that either way,
was
we
one of
shouldn't have done that. We completely destabilized that.
Libya was one of the most stable. No,
it wasn't. I'm sorry. Stable governments don't have revolutions. We didn't
Yeah,
know
also
revolutions
Gaddafi-
we funded, like revolutions we funneled massive amount of money in, and most people didn't want to fight those revolutions.
Also,
The number of people
Gaddafi
fighting-
was a
Hey guys,
terrorist.
we're getting off. Get off
Uh,
topic, guys.
This broke up. Okay, I mean you're just wrong about the Libyan revolution. Libya was not stable. Not this is a nation that produced the Lockerbie bombings. This is a nation that tried to like form a one nation Africa, being rejected after they invaded Egypt. Like, this is not a stable nation. This is a nation run by a madman dictator who tortured people.
Yeah, great.
I don't think he said that it was stable. I think he just said we destabilized it further.
He said it was the most stable nation in Africa.
No,
Oh,
not
did-
even.
did he?
I said it was the most stable, like, Muslim nation in that region.
What, more than Morocco?
Well, Morocco, fine. They're fine. Maybe it was. I guess I was spoken that.
I mean, maybe. I mean, it was. I mean,
I didn't say.
concurrently,
Yeah, I did
there's
say.
the
It
thing.
was, I said it was, maybe I didn't make sense, but like I was saying, it was like one of the more stable regions.
I'm curious, if it was this stable, why were we able to get away with funding like a revolution there, a pro-democracy revolution?
Do you know how many soldiers actually fought in that revolution?
Enough to kill Gaddafi.
Okay, guys, we're getting off topic. We're gonna get back to
It was barely
again.
20,000. Like, it
Okay.
wasn't a major scale revolution.
You think like Russia could form?
Okay. We're going to. Does everybody see the screen?
Yes.
The Belt and Road Initiative. Is everybody familiar with that?
Yes.
Basically, or is colloquially called the New Silk Roads. But either way, we won't go into too much detail about it. But I have heard from God, who was it?
Wait, why aren't we going into detail about it? It's like super cool.
Okay, who? I feel like somebody else. Like I feel like somebody else could probably explain it a little better than I could, because I'm not a particular expert when it comes to Chinese strategy. Like I know the basics, but I don't know. LSP, do you think you could go into?
Yeah, the strategy is just to export like economic influence the world over. That's why it's called like the New Silk Road. The human rights influence or impact it has is what's interesting. Most of the ports that the Belt and Roads Initiative like runs through exit out of Xinjiang, and Xinjiang was a hotbed of separatist movements for a minority Muslim population we know today as the Uyghurs. Right, there were two instances that this region was its own like separate and autonomous government in the 20th century, and those nationalist separatist spirits haven't exactly left the region, which is the impetus for. I mean, I would argue it's the impetus for the cultural genocide that China's carrying out now. It's purely based on the Belt and Roads Initiative. It's because the Belt and Roads Initiative is an avenue to assert power, and Xinjiang could stand in the way of that power if a separatist movement were to form there and break off.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting how this only started in like 2015, or at least what we know of.
2014, I believe.
2014. Because it's like, you'd think this would have happened like in the 90s, but
Yeah, I have to say, there's this weird thing about China where they act like they think that they're gonna collapse in a year, and a lot of their behaviors are like this we have to act now or we're not gonna exist, and it's very odd to me. It's like,
I mean, that's kind of a cultural. It's kind of a cultural thing. They've
Well,
kind
but
of always
yeah,
been like that.
there is
But
some truth to that, though, because if you know the demographics crisis in China.
yeah, I mean, demographics, obviously the hand people are fucked, but they're not the only people in China. And China used to be called the land of five races because of all the many people that were there. China has never been a monolith culture. That's a myth that Mao put forward. China was always a unification of multiple groups.
I mean,
that
yes and
came and
no.
went.
Not monolithic. There's no such thing as a monolithic civilization. But in terms of its like culture forms, it's always been more, I guess, quote unquote, homogenous, I suppose.
Yeah,
Maybe that's not the best word, but it's always been more uniform than other world cultures.
It's Han dominant for sure, but
yeah,
like Han, the people group have gone to and fro with what culture they prefer to emulate. Like for a while they're all LARPing. Oh, for a while the Mongolians LARPed as the Han. For a while the Manchurians had their LARPing power. It changes, but they all. That's the thing. Like if you call anything that's civilized in China Han, then yeah, it appears that China's always been Han. But who the Han were as like cultural and practice have shifted throughout the centuries all the time.
Yeah, but so Uncle Chan, I noticed he kind of wants us to bring up this the Falun Gong propaganda.
Oh my god, dude! Falun Gong, man. Have you guys seen JJ McCullough's video on the Falun Gong?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. About
God, yeah, it is so funny that everyone's just sort of pretended that the Falun Gong are just a normal religious group and not some crazy fucking cult that Chinese communists.
I don't know much about them. They're like, aren't they like a remnant of the old holy rebellion that happened 100 years ago?
They're their own thing, man. They came into existence in
Red put me on. Give me a lowdown of what they are.
So they believe it's been a while, but I think they follow this one dude who says he's like a god on earth, I think.
The Dolly alpaca.
Yeah, he's an interdimensional being who can communicate and stuff. And Jesus and Buddha and Moses were all interdimensional fucking super beings or whatever the fuck. They all worship him. Him and a bunch of most loyal cult members worship him all day. In some resort in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you know they were so close?
They're fun, and they're the people that fund the Shen Yun theater group.
Yeah.
Fun fact: Shen Yun is
they're
selling
everywhere.
propaganda.
I've been meaning to go to one of their shows to see what they're all about.
Yeah, it's just cult propaganda. Who cares?
Yeah, but either way, so yeah, but with the we'll get to the Uyghurs later. I think probably the best thing is just to move on to see what cover what Russia's been up to lately.
Uyghur, please.
Pardon?
Uyghur, please.
All right, so
Actually, hey, buddy, I'm gonna head out now and go to bed because I got to work.
Good night.
all right, thanks for coming on for the little bit you could.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, dude.
All right, so we're gonna cover.
What are we doing?
Okay.
What are we going to
As you all know, I restored the rights of 173,000 individuals who lost their right because they'd been convicted of a felony.
Now, next on Outside Source, we're going to turn back to the conflict in the east of Ukraine. We talked about it an awful lot in 2014 when the war there first broke out between Russia-backed separatists and Ukrainian troops. We're talking about it today because there are multiple reports of a Russian military buildup. Ukraine says 28 Russian battalion groups involving 25,000 personnel have appeared along its north and eastern borders in the last few days. Reports suggest some Russian artillery has come from as far as Siberia. And according to Ukraine, Russia has 3,000 officers and military instructors in areas of the east of Ukraine that are marked here in red and which have been controlled by Russia-backed separatists since they were seized in 2014. While Moscow very much denies helping the rebels, it says any Russians involved are volunteers. There is, though, a lot of proof to suggest otherwise.
Bullshit.
Now,
So
since
true,
2014,
King, so
there have been multiple ceasefires which have broken down. The most recent was agreed in July, but this is the situation now. There's still sporadic fighting along the line of separation. That stretches for 500 kilometers. For example, these pictures are from a place called Avdiivka. This is in territory held by Ukrainian troops. And this is the account of one Ukrainian soldier on the front line.
Every day we've been hearing their armoured units and tanks driving. The tanks aren't far away, 1 kilometre tops. We can hear them warming up the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles.
Now, Russia hasn't denied troop movements, but it denies planning any form of military attack. Here's a Kremlin spokesman.
They are pretty loud. Well, it depends on the tank, maybe.
The main thing is to not provoke again the military hostilities of the Ukrainian armed forces in relation to their own people or people who live in the self-proclaimed republics. The situation in eastern Ukraine remains very tense. Any statements which can then be used to create the wrong picture can only further fuel tensions. I don't want to do it.
Well, everyone agrees the situation's tense, but not many share Russia's perspective on this, certainly not in the West. Last week, the US put its forces in Europe on higher alert, citing escalations of Russian aggression. Then on Monday, the EU's foreign policy chief raised severe concern over the Russian military activity surrounding Ukraine. The UK added it too had significant concerns. And how does the former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt?
Obviously, they are getting all of these forces to the city of Ukraine for some sort of purpose. I mean, to put pressure on Ukraine diplomatically, or perhaps to undertake a limited operation, hard strike, and then pave the way for some sort of diplomacy in order to pressure Kiev into further concessions on the issue, to get some movement from the Russian point of view in their direction in the Ukraine conflict. It is clearly a deliberate decision by the Kremlin to escalate the conflict. Where this will lead us, we don't know, but it's dangerous.
Now, let's be clear. Russia does hold military exercises in this region, but this analyst in The Guardian points out that the current troop deployment appears out of cycle
bastion of journalism,
and are not regular troop rotations. And every time Russia does something irregular of this nature, it draws attention back to what happened in 2014. This was Vladimir Putin in Crimea 2 months after Russia annexed the region from Ukraine. It was the biggest land grab in Europe since the Second World War.
Look at how happy she is. Putin likes his newest kingdom.
Well, let's get the analysis now of Vitaly Shevchenko from BBC Monitoring. First of all, what's your reading of Russia's motivation for moving all of these troops?
Well, it's a frozen conflict that appears to be getting hotter. We've been seeing lots of social media posts of tanks and artillery and armored vehicles being moved about right next to Ukraine's border. Russia says that it's free to do as it pleases within its territory. If it wishes to send its troops somewhere, so be it. But Ukrainians know that what can happen after you see Russian troops being moved about right next to a border. Next thing you know is armored men with no insignia storming your local government buildings. As for why now, what's going on?
Can relate.
One trend of thought that we've picked up while watching Russian media, the independent parts of the Russian media, is that there's another big story unfolding in Russia involving a key opposition figure called Alexei Navalny, who's in jail, hunger striking, apparently.
Okay, that's enough of that. I think we kind of we get the idea.
No one cares about Alexa. Let them rot.
Yeah. So either way, so what are your thoughts on this? So this is just within the past couple of days. More, I mean, not the Ukraine annexation, of course. That was several years ago. But would you say that it's too far to speculate that Russia could be planning on going further into Ukraine?
Probably not.
And I think it's reasonable to think he wants to go further.
Yeah, and remember what I said about privateers in the East China Sea? Russia does that like to a professional level.
Yeah.
This entire operation was this is basically a pirate state like that's been set up.
I'm just surprised it didn't really happen earlier.
Yeah.
But I guess it sort of makes sense in retrospect because you don't want to go further into Ukraine right after you just took Crimea.
Yeah, I mean, this is the typical Russian policy. You make all your major moves in the early years of a new American administration or in the last years of an old one. And so Putin is now seeing, well, now is the time to act. And I mentioned in Polycrad's Discord that I'm strongly suspicious that like Russia has always treated China as like a friend by necessity, not desire. And I could totally see him collaborating with Xi to you take Taiwan while I take Ukraine. The U.S. can't pick both; they have to pick one. And whoever wins will support you. The one who wins. It's one of those mutual agreements. Maybe not. Maybe it's just like indirect inference.
It's like in those movies where it's like the sequel, or it's usually the third one. So in the first movie, the good guys and bad guys are fighting. The second movie, the bad guys return and they fight again. And then in the third movie, an even bigger bad guy comes. It's like, hey, let's put our differences aside and fight the bad guy. That's basically what it is.
And here's the thing that's
go on.
Here's the thing that just annoys me. This is off topic a little, but why doesn't Germany ever do anything about this? It's like they're supposed to be the largest economy in Europe, could be the largest military.
Because Germans have shit foreign policy. Literally, the new leader of the CDU is unironically.
Well, there's no way for them to have a good foreign policy. They don't have a fucking military.
Yeah. They don't use their military. And on top of that, the current leader of the CDU, who's probably going to overtake Merkel in the chancellorship. I mean, he's an Assadist. He's defended Assad. He's literally he sounds like Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, this is the thing with
Tulsi Gabbard is not base, and I'll rip out your trachea.
No, this is the thing about Germany. It's this is the one time you guys need to be militaristic towards Russia, and now
No.
I know.
By the way, breaking news. I don't know if any of you care, but DMX has passed away.
Who's DMX?
He's a good rapper.
Oh, okay. I don't listen.
He overdosed. What did he overdose on?
Of course.
He overdosed on being based.
Yeah, whatever. He overdosed a week ago and was in the hospital and was brain dead for a while.
That's sad.
Yeah, but
that's sad.
Yeah.
He
pour one out for the homies.
Pour one out for the homies. He's going to the big building sky.
Back to Russia. What do you guys think of this idea? This is something I've been toying with for a while, and it actually had some. I was surprised. The neoliberal Twitter handle.
Yeah.
I don't know who runs it, but
Colin Mortimer, Colin Mortimer, Pat Mann, and Jason Harrison.
Are they related to the same people who do the neoliberal podcast?
Yeah, I forget who's the podcast.
Jeremiah Johnson.
Yeah, something.
Fun fact, that's the name of Candace's boyfriend in Phineas and Ferb. Okay, anyway, moving on. Moving on. Anyway, so the neoliberal Twitter guy, I would not expect them to have liked this, but I said use Crimea as a bargaining chip. Say, okay, you can keep Crimea, Russia. However, you have to back troops off from the border at Moldova. You have to get out of Georgia. You have to do this, and there we'll recognize you being in Crimea. What do you guys think of that? Because on one hand, it could be considered appeasement and emboldening Putin, but on the other hand, there are so many concessions that involve him kind of pulling out.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
I don't know.
I mean, if we're okay, I mean, because you're assuming he's going to abide by that agreement, and I don't think he will.
Also, I don't think you can really give Putin an inch, because if you give him an inch, you'll take a mile.
Yeah, you can't give in to somebody like Putin. That's the problem.
I just say wait. Honestly, it might be better to wait Putin out until he dies, because then
he is. The rumor was that he was going to retire next year.
Putin's never going to retire.
He's going to remain in control of Russia until he dies.
So this is what I think. So okay.
Go on.
Say what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to point. The rumor is he has MS and he's starting to develop shakes. He's not going to be all there in a few years.
Well, okay, then he's effectively going to die, right? So yeah. even if he's still technically alive, he's not going to be there. He's going to actually become what right wingers think Joe Biden is right now. So,
yeah, he's in the process of becoming that.
So in that case, with a heavily weakened Russia,
not even right wingers, just the boomer cubs.
Just boomer. I mean, also far leftists. You know, the amazing
Jimmy Dore types.
Fucking joke over and over again about how Biden, dementia. Anyways, I mean, I don't know who would I don't know enough about Russian politics to know who would.
I don't think anybody knows about anything about Russian politics. I don't even think the Russians know anything about. Well,
I mean, because the question is right. If we're gonna wait out Putin, we're hedging a bet that the guy who's going to replace Putin is going to be more reasonable, and that's not necessarily a safe bet.
Honestly, and I hate to be the bearer of black pills here, but I feel like at this point, the best thing is for there to be another Putin after Putin, somebody who's as quote unquote strong as Putin. And this isn't me saying like Putin's an effective leader. So I think there has to be a leader as effective as Putin who'd continue on sort of his who'd continue on his sort of stabilizing legacy than for there to be a weak leader, because if there's a weak leader, then the oligarchs are just going to go all at it. Yeah. And we're going to see Russia within the next 50 years become the world, and I've said this many times, the world's very first failed nuclear state.
It's entirely possible. Russia has always been this. It has this leftover effect from feudalism, where the sons always have to fight for who's going to rule the country whenever the king dies. I don't know how to fix that, because no state has really survived that situation.
I feel like once Putin dies, there's going to be a lot of political infighting in the cabinet.
There's going to be a large vacuum, and that's going to leave the state weak, and that's probably going to.
No, it's going to fail. Russia is not going to survive.
Yeah, you're going to see probably revamps of separatist movements, especially in Chechnya or whatever.
Honestly, I don't know what you guys think of this. I actually think if the Russian government fails, I feel like the Chinese are actually going to be the ones to exploit that, because.
Oh, for sure.
But then again, I don't know enough about anything, so please don't take what I say seriously. I'm talking out my ass.
We don't take anything you say seriously.
I just want to make disclosure. I am a neurotic teenager from the St. Louis suburbs. Do not take anything I say seriously.
Yeah, I'm a neurotic
teenager. St. Louis.
Wait,
hold on a second. St. Louis suburbs. What's your opinion on Austin Peterson?
Who's Austin Peterson?
Okay, never mind.
Wait, the name sounds familiar.
St. Louis libertarian guy.
Oh wait! Oh, he's dumb. I don't like him. He's Kreneg.
Well, I wanted to just say, I'm not an expert in Russia. Can I just operate on what my family told me when they my great grandparents came from there and left us some understanding of the politics of it, and it's always been a brutal state. It's always been it's always survived through brutal acts of their kings or governors or whatever. The only thing I'll point out is that I think Peter Hitchens actually brings this up too, because Peter Hitchens in Russia noticed something interesting. Within the Russian language, there are these little quirks, because it's kind of like a caveman speak language sometimes.
Are you just saying that because they have no linking or helping verbs?
No, they literally lack conjugations of some things. Like Ukrainian literally has extra conjugations, like proverb, I forget. I think Russia lacks one of the main like ways of conjugating words that Ukraine has. Ukrainian is actually a more advanced form of the Russian language. It would be like the same.
Well, there's a problem with using terms like that to describe.
No, it's true. Like some languages have more specificity for terminologies, and others are more
complex. Complexity doesn't necessarily mean advancedness. If you catch what I mean.
Yeah. Either way,
it's kind of weird. I do want to use the word, I don't know, but one of those flukes are that, like, for example, like Russian doesn't technically have a word for like safety. It has a word that means like not dangerous rather than just the word safety. Peter Hitchens says that this is like kind of par for the course because their history, basically, like they never really had the concept of safety. It wasn't the Mongols raiding them, it was someone in Germany or someone here or there. Like they never experienced a safety, so they had to like invent a word based off like negating the word for danger. So their word for safety is like I think it's like biz, I think, or something like that. And biz is like it's their version of like non. And so basically, like, they don't have a word for safety. They have a word for non-safe. Not non-safe, non-danger. And what that means is that like in terms of like how the word is constructed, is it implies work. You need to work to get safety. The natural course of life is danger. Whereas in the West, we have a word for both safety and danger that like can exist in either state depending on where you are. So in the Russian mindset, they have to actively do things to get safety, which means like, you know, conquering and creating buffer states.
Honestly, this might be a bit controversial, but I think that this proves that there is a level of cultural essentialism that sort of pervades.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Countries. Like, yeah, so it's not so much like a random act of them trying to put their language together, but it's more so they have their own distinct way of viewing things. So.
Like another example that I brought up in your Discord is like the word Ukraine is the Russian word for like the border.
Yeah, that's why you notice Ukrainians call their country Ukraine. Russians call Ukraine the Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine has always been Russia's, but it's not exactly like border. If you type in Google Translate border, you'll get something else. It means something more akin to like the outreach, like the outback, but like it implies border.
The borderlands.
Yeah, borderlands is a more accurate translation.
Borderlands too.
Yeah, but like if you don't have the concept of a line in the sand in your language, and the closest akin to it you get is a region rather than a line, then, you know, whereas a Westerner, if you cross the border, that's when you declare war. In Russia, if you enter the country, you're declaring war on the country next over. And that goes way back to like the Mongolian mindset of like, you attack my vassal estates, I destroy your country. Russia has always acted like one of the like primitive steppe countries, basically. It always has. I don't believe cultures are equal. Russia is primitive, like linguistically and culturally. It is a few
they're sort of like in the beginning of their
yeah.
So George,
wait. I don't think Russian society is primitive.
No, I think he's saying they have sort of like a primitive mindset, but they've imported basically they sort of have that Western overlay, utilizing all this Western technology they've imported.
It's just because what you have to understand is that Putin, I forget who made this argument. I think it was Peter Comrade in his book Who Lost Russia, but I'm not sure. He said Putin is merely acting as any other Russian autocrat would. So the context of that is, since Russia was invaded by the Mongols, really scarred them, so that really heightened a cultural and political need to secure your borders. You know, that's why they expanded out to Siberia and expanded everywhere else. I don't think it's because Russia is primitive that they're doing this. They just have Russian leadership thinks
maybe
very,
not
very
primitive, maybe they're
way until the country
really
dies.
primeval, maybe.
Like, I don't think
It's the same thing to me. Well, I mean, if your solution to stopping invasion is to just keep conquering people so that no one can invade you, it's kind of primitive. That's not really a diplomatic solution.
I'd say maybe it's more of like a medieval mindset as opposed to
even the
primitive.
medievals didn't have that mindset. They wouldn't conquer.
Well, no, because the thing is, it's that Russia has no natural borders, right?
It actually
Or
does.
Very few natural borders, right, to protect it from invasion. So
they have. Sorry, go on.
That's
why it conquered out is to get to natural borders.
Yeah, Russia is a very weird country in terms of its geographical location. Yeah,
Russia's border is itself. It's just too big and cold to conquer. It's like Egypt technically doesn't have any quote unquote natural borders. It's just a fucking desert, so no one's gonna invade you.
But the thing is, it's like well, for one, much of Siberia is far more temperate than you think it is.
It is. I've been there. I know. It's very tropical.
So it's not like, obviously, if you're going to like Archangelisk or how the fuck you pronounce it, that's going to be a tough go at it. But if you're just want to take over the central arteries, geography is only going to be an inhibitor in certain areas, like when you're crossing rivers and mountains, right? It's lots of Siberia. It's on a steppe. It's on a plain, so it's not hard to traverse. That's why the Mongols were able to do it. They went across the steppe.
Do you know what happened when Napoleon entered Moscow?
They burned it.
No, they didn't just burn it. They left. There was nothing. There was nothing, like they physically left. The population physically moved.
Physical removal.
No, like auto removal.
Physical self removal.
Auto hoppyism. But the point is, that's not a tactic a Westerner would think. A Westerner, like, Vienna comes under siege, you defend Vienna. London gets bombed, you call up the fighters who defend London. There are not many examples in the Western history where you just leave the city being conquered and you move to a new capital. That's a very Russian thing to do, because when your whole country is your defense, you can just move. Yeah, okay, a part of your country gets conquered. So
basically, they're like a 7th century people living in a 21st century world.
Sure, Barbie. But no,
I guess in order to sum up basically what you're.
Well, yeah, doing that during Napoleon's invasion is a fundamentally nomadic approach to managing your country. Like, you just move. You don't defend. You don't have a concept of defending your homeland because you are always on your homeland. You can move anywhere else on your homeland and just wait a year for them to die in winter and you'll take back. Like, you have to understand, like, when Russia views threats, they don't view it as something to I guess, talk to. It's something to just avoid until they die. Anyway, like Ukraine. So anyway, all this is a long-winded way of saying when Ukraine started going into NATO, Russia interpreted that as an invasion, because that is it literally translates to our borders are joining Europe. Like, how can you not avoid sounding like an invasion? It's like just a fundamental structure of their language.
Okay, so just moving. Oh, actually, before we go on to talking about both Russia and China, just their relationship with each other at the moment as it stands, I wanted to bring up. Is everyone familiar with Alexander Dugin?
Barely.
No.
I should know more.
Pan-Eurasianism. His idea that he basically wants to build
gang.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. That's his ideology. But I mean, I referred to his idea of sort of a growing Eurasian civilization with Russia at the center, kind of fighting against the remnants of a quote unquote decadent Atlantic Western Faustian civilization or whatever. But okay, I mean, I don't know. I thought he might be an interesting discussion, but I mean, I guess not very many people here are super familiar with.
For Eurasianism? That sounds like,
Pan-Eurasianism.
That just sounds like a meme. Like, Eurasia.
It basically is.
Like, Eurasia's too diverse. It's like.
Well, no. Well, okay. When I think he means Eurasia, he's excluding East Asia and the Middle East.
But even then, it's still.
I don't know. It's weird. He outlined it in a book. His book, what was it? The Fourth Political Theory, I think, is what it's called.
Maybe it's just because I'm a dumbass. That's what it's called.
Well, no, it's worth going into. Probably merits its own stream at some point in the future. But either way, so let's move on. Hold on. So this is a video from, I believe it's an Indian. This is an Indian outlet, I believe, but I don't know. It's hold on. You guys hear it?
Subscribe to Swarajya and press the bell icon.
Yes,
Yep,
ma'am.
that's
In a
it.
bid to build on the common resilient ground ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit scheduled later this year, Indian and Russian foreign ministers sought to address each other's concerns on a wide range of issues.
All right,
From
I'm
defense
gonna go to bed.
supplies
They
to
got
the
stuff to do
S-400
tomorrow.
air defense
Good
system,
night.
India's
Right,
role
good
in
night.
Afghanistan and
Thanks for
Taliban's
having me,
involvement
Politicrat.
in power
Yeah,
sharing,
no problem.
to cooperation on COVID vaccines and Delhi's participation in the Quad grouping. Just about a month after the first ever Quad leaders virtual summit, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov sought to downplay growing ties with Beijing, saying Russia-China relations are at their highest ever, but these aren't aimed at a military alliance. He took a swipe at the Quad grouping and referred it to as Asian NATO, a term incidentally used by Beijing. However, this is not the first time that Lavrov has expressed his apprehension about the Quad, but his reference to Asian NATO is a construct used by Beijing. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called the Quad the Indo-Pacific NATO in the past.
Okay, did anybody understand what they were saying?
Not really. Not really.
Okay, so more or less, I mean, I had to watch it a couple times really in order to kind of get a grasp of what they were saying. But basically so you have China and Russia right now, who I guess they seem like they're bedfellows. However, in reality, Russia's just as freaked out about China as we are. Basically, it's kind of a three-way freak out show. And so basically Russia has apparently been meeting with, or Moscow has been in contact with India's government lately. So it's possible they're making moves on that front, possibly to try to find some kind of working relationship with India. So now basically, so I have one of two hypotheses, basically. Number one, they're either trying to influence India to try to move away from the U.S., or it could also be a little bit of both, to try to move away from the U.S. and to basically make sure that they try to tone down on their aggression towards China, or Russia's freaked the fuck out about China and realizes, hey, I mean, we don't want to like outright enter into a buddy agreement with the U.S., but India and the U.S. are close, and we kind of at least want to get close to India as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, so yeah, there could be a little bit of both, but at the same time, I think it's clear that Russia realizes the value of India right now with a growing China.
Have you guys heard of not China, but a lot of China's like upper echelons are debating the sphere of influence in East Russia?
Interesting. I have not heard about this. Do you want to go into detail?
Well, like, yeah, most of Eastern Russia is like unoccupied, like wilderness, but East Russia along the coast is fairly well developed and has several million people that with a rather undeveloped infrastructure with a lot of raw resources. And there's a growing number of I guess I'll call them nobility in China. Oligarchs in China who view East Russia with this like, this used to be ours only like 400 years ago. This was ours. Why did we just let Russia take it? Because like Russia barely fought any wars with China. They just walked in and claimed it, and it was like the northernmost provinces of China. So they didn't really like try to reclaim it. They just didn't give a shit. And there's a debate in China. If Putin's gone and Russia's a failed state, do we take Eastern Russia? Do we intervene, quote unquote intervene when Russia collapses and take Eastern Russia? And this is obviously a concern for Russia because it does appear Putin has not provided an heir, and no one's really sure what happens when he's gone. And so there's this risk that when Putin's gone, what happens to Russia? And if Russia has no clear contingency plans, why wouldn't China take back the territories that they lost when Russia expanded east? So there are elements within the Russian government who would be inclined to be prepared for this possible outcome of a post-Putin Russia by, having some extra stability by having an Indian ally. Several Central Asian allies, Kazakhstan and all the other stands there. One of the reasons why Russia is so focused on the Central Asian allies is, you have to have a unified front against Chinese interference into the continent. China's not only interfering south into the sea, they could easily switch the gears if it doesn't work out for them and just take the weaker Russia and Central Asian states.
Okay. Grayson, do you have any commentary on that?
That actually does sound like something that China's up to. I could believe it. I haven't heard much about China and Russia, but I haven't heard much about them fighting. But I know they do it, and they probably just don't make it too much of a news story because they don't want people to think that this is a weak alliance when it clearly is.
Yeah. It's presented to the world as a united.
Oh my God! Okay. So I'm sorry. I was looking Googling articles right now.
Yeah.
Potentially to survey here as we get towards the end. I meant to Google China Russia, but I accidentally Googled Trump Russia. Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, at one point there was some supposed diplomatic channel that said China was claiming Vostok or something in case Russia falls, like telling Russia, hey, if you fall, we're taking this city. And Russia was like, fuck off. No, I'm my credentials, I guess. I went to school with one of, I'm not going to say who, but in the Obama years, one of the diplomats to Russia, and I'm also sort of friends with someone in the fake, well, his parent is in the fake Chinese Senate that doesn't do anything. So I kind of hear both sides, and it does sound like, behind the scenes, there's Russia could not stop China from invading.
No, definitely
it's
not.
Simply, it's that simple.
So Russia lacks the infrastructure and they're not very well rounded in terms of their power. However, they do have a larger military than China, but a lot of this is just leftover from the Soviet era and all that buildup. And plus the generals are basically warlords. So
like you said, with Russia might be the first failed nuclear state. That's a lot of facilities China could easily justify taking to protect itself from terrorists.
Precisely. Exactly.
That's a lot.
That's the thing. I can actually see interventions into Russia, not actually military interventions, just bomb interventions to take out their nuclear facilities.
Yep.
I don't know if that.
I don't know. Take out, more like raid.
Yeah.
Why do you think China isn't building more nuclear weapons? China only has 300 small scale, local, very small nuclear weapons for self-defense. Why do you think they're not building ICBMs for international warfare?
There's 10,000 right there next to them.
Yeah. If you're bordering 8,000 ICBMs that you could just take in a weekend if the country fell apart, why would you bother wasting the time and money to build your own? Your assets are just there as a potentiality.
So that's just one question. I don't know about the failed state though. I just wonder how much Putin has left. How many years he?
Russia still has several hundred large. I think they have 4 or 3 times the amount of nukes as China does. They still have more than us.
Their military assets far surpass those of China's.
Yeah,
they don't have as many soldiers as China, but then you don't gauge how large a military is based upon soldiers alone.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, okay, I have 1 million Zerglings, but I have a few 100,000 Like I have like 300,000 Space Marines plus like 100 battle cruisers. It's like who's gonna win? Who's gonna win?
And what was I gonna say? Russia still has the largest nuclear stockpile, I think, to this day.
Yeah,
larger than the U.S.
Well, actually, okay. But what about U.S. and NATO combined, or U.S. and rest of NATO combined? Would
That's a good question.
I'm not even going to bother looking that up. I don't think it's even that important.
Also, I just looked it up. Apparently, Putin's 68, and life expectancy in Russia is only 72. So, statistically speaking, he has 4 years left.
Yeah, but you can add in 10 more from Russian healthcare. Russian healthcare is actually surprisingly good.
Yeah, that is actually true.
At least in the urban.
Oh, you know what? Did you hear North Korea? They had great response to COVID. Like their healthcare was great with COVID. Basically, like they kept it down at 0 for most of the time because whenever somebody got COVID, they just shot them.
Well, here's the thing: authoritarian states are good with lockdowns because half the population is in lockdown already.
Oh yeah, no, China. Like, I mean, that was, I guess, a benefit of, I guess, China's culture because they were so willing to submit to the lockdowns and everything. Because I mean, it's just again, a culture like that's why I think it's a very kind of, I guess, Eurocentric way of looking at the world to think, oh yeah, the Chinese, they're being oppressed and lied to, and it's like 1984 and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it would be like that if you transplanted one of us and put us there. But the thing is, they're not clamoring for freedom in the same way we would be if we were under that sort of system. Because I mean, that's sort of been the governmental administrative precedent for thousands of years, more or less.
Well, most of them.
Most of them. I mean, but either way. So I'm going to do an article. I have no idea what these outlets are, but they look like one of them looks like an Indian.
They look reputable.
Well, I don't know. I really don't care at the moment. They're international. Let's just say that they're international. So, So Moscow, they're not leaders for life, not technically at least, but in political reality, the powerful tenures of China's Xi Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, and as of this week, Russia's Tsar Vladimir I are looking as if they will extend much deeper into the 21st century, even as the two superpowers whose destinies they steer gather more clout with each passing year.
Yeah, I like that you translated their names and titles to like classics.
Oh yeah,
because they are like I one of the things I've always wanted to do is to draw a map of the world, but like using like classical titles with like Emperor Biden.
It basically is like, I mean, honestly, they should just honestly the CCP is just another Chinese dynasty. They have the mandate of heaven right now.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is, and I'm not even joking. I'm not even being like exaggerating.
Yeah, you're
but
right.
Putin signs a law allowing him to hold power till 2036. Russian president been in power for more than 2 decades, longest of any other Kremlin leader since Joseph Stalin. Pushed through a constitutional vote last year, allowing him to run again. Xi came to power in 2012. He has even tighter controls. Most powerful leader since Mao. That's just background.
Mao and Stalin, two very good influences on your nation right there.
But
I still am not
they both tap nationalist feelings. Moscow's relations with the West sank to post-Cold War lows. Mixed accusations of election meddling. Putin has increasingly sought to strengthen ties with China. Again, that's probably more or less like a sort of a reaction, like sort of a self-defense mechanism of sorts.
Yeah.
Like not because he wants to, but because it's like, well, the West are like coming out of me right now. But Washington allies over Beijing's human rights record, Xinjiang. So yeah, this is just recently Biden describes Putin as a killer, not good for optics. So yeah, I mean, looking more like this is just kind of describing the possibility of military cooperation, and then that goes on to. So I found an Indian. This is an Indian outlet right here. Moving on. sort of a continuation, I suppose. But by Shinjoi Chowdhury, yeah. Russia's ruled out any military alliance with China, says Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, adding that Moscow's supply of military equipment will continue. The statement's significant considering the India-China military standoff for nearly a year in East Ladakh. Speaking alongside the Indian External Affairs Minister, Mr. Lavrov spoke of Russia manufacturing 750 million doses of the Sputnik vaccine in India. Okay, interesting. Discussions about the manufacture of the Bharat biotech in Russia are on. So obviously they're engaging in some kind, I don't want to say commerce, but exchange. But both sides mentioned Afghanistan situation featured in the discussions. Lavrov said that any discussion without the involvement of the Taliban was unsustainable. Regional powers, a reference to Pakistan and other countries, said he would be involved. This dude added that the security of India would have to be kept in mind during the peace process. While Lavrov did not answer questions about India buying additional regiments, he said that the military ties were deepening and respected India's decision to diversify the purchase of military weapons from other countries, a reference to the United States and France, and said that Russia was reassured that there was no plan for an Asian NATO. You see, that's what I find interesting. It shows that they're trying to explore additional options. That Russia does not want to have to be, they don't want to feel forced anymore to have to go towards China, because they know that that's just opening a can of worms that nobody will be able to eat.
Yeah. What was the last sentence you read right there, quick?
I exited out of it.
Oh, no worries then.
Yeah.
I forgot what I wanted to say.
I could go back to it if you want.
It's already passed.
Okay.
I'm starting to fall. I'm sorry. It's getting a little late here, so I might head out soon. But
yeah, I was thinking. Do you have room or time for like another 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Either way. So what do you guys think of that? Do you think it's more likely that Russia will end up going with China, or do you think they're going to try taking a more? I think the more interesting route and the more beneficial for them would be India.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, because I don't think that's an easy question to answer. You have to think about that.
it just seems that like India has always been this like very strong asset for anyone who rules it, be it the Muslims, the British, and maybe one day now like themselves, hopefully once. I have multiple times on like a lot of like OI and other streams I've been on. I've like simped for India pretty heavily because India is
pretty much all we can simp for at this point.
Well, no, like India is a English speaking state with like an immunity to Western degeneracy, right?
It's just funny how you worded that.
In all seriousness, like they just never bought the global homo pill, and instead, like they went with no, we like our culture, we have nothing to apologize for, fuck off. And as a result, India has like
you see that with Modi right now too, with the with the Hindu nationalism.
Yeah, and you come at the cost of obviously Christians like myself are going to be oppressed, but at the same time, if you respect them, they can also be very powerful allies in like worse evils like China.
Yeah, I feel like the only people they'll probably, other than Hindus, actually no, this is interesting. I wonder with India what they're going to do to the Parsi, because the Parsi, that is they do constitute the largest. I think not only the largest Zoroastrian community outside of Persia, but also the largest Zoroastrian community in general, because I know the Islamic government in Iran doesn't particularly care for the Zoroastrians. But then again, you see how Hinduism and Zoroastrianism are both like the two major Aryan religions. Mm-hmm. So and they have those common Vedic roots. So yeah, but yeah, no, I agree with Ken Zuck. Abandoning India, like I know so it would basically be suicide for Russia to completely write off India as a potential partner in certain respects, and then go to China, because again, China and Russia is just as afraid of China as Western countries are afraid of China at this
I feel
point.
like you're trying to play both sides. Like
That's possible. That is highly possible.
You kind of see this with China and the Middle East, how they like have that Iran deal, but yet they're also like the largest trade partner of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Oh, I actually didn't know that. Is China the largest trading partner with Saudi Arabia?
I believe so. It's one of, at least. I know that much. I can look it up.
I think the big thing is that, like, you get an English-speaking country that's developed and kind of in the same like ethos as, like, India acts like it had a communist revolution that it got over, but it never did. Like, you see that this thing in Russia with like a desire to return to tradition, and like just memory hold the last like century of communism. India has that too, where they have this like return to tradition. Let's just memory hold the whole century under British rule, but look to it for inspiration too. It's a weird like balance that.
I mean, India is definitely doing it more smoothly. I mean, they're definitely more effective at this quote unquote memory holding.
Yeah, and so from Russia's perspective, India is an access to the Anglosphere, and India will obviously have a lot of like Commonwealth access and Catholic stuff.
So just
I found Japan is the largest export partner, but China is the biggest import partner.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But either way, looking at how Russia's more or less, especially over recent years, especially over the past year, tried to foster closer relationships with India. It almost, at least to me, looks like they're trying to use that as a backdoor to at least indirectly maybe make kind of an appeal to the West and be like, hey, we realize that China, like, basically, because I've always said it's either going to be Russia in the West versus China, or China and Russia versus the West. And I'm actually starting to get the sense that Russia thinks that Russia and the West versus China will probably work out the best in the end, especially because there are, at least marginally speaking, Russia and the West have their respective worldviews have more in common than either of their worldviews have to China, which is very distinct. So,
I don't know. Maybe after when Putin dies, but I don't think Putin has any keen interest.
Well, Putin doesn't have a long-term plan for Russia after he dies. I think
so
that's pretty clear.
I mean, he probably dies in like 4 to 10 years.
Well, let's say Putin dies in 10 years. Again, Russia's either going to become the world's first failed nuclear state, or we're going to get another Putin. I don't think there's any sort of middle ground.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but like Russia is not definitely not a stable state.
I don't think it has much of a future.
Yeah, Russia itself was an experiment on like basically how big can your tribe get, and they got pretty big, and now it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And again, like India also might provide a source of like at least economic stability, or if nothing else, like a ward off the Chinese aggression a bit. Because like it's it's really nice to have a billion population like Anglo state willing to like be your friend. that's a lot of confidence in the scary world around you.
But yeah, sort of bringing this to the perspective of looking at it from the perspective of realpolitik now, and sort of power, but like balancing powers. What about when India, like, let's say India completely outperforms China. I mean, or what's the word I'm looking for? But basically, China stagnates. China gets sleepy again, and then India, you have it as the next great Asian power. Do you think India is potentially a sleeping giant? And,
absolutely, yeah.
Do you think it could potentially, in the not the long term, but the long term, pose a threat to the West?
I don't see it.
But here's the thing: is that this happens a lot in Asian countries. You have this with Japan, now you're having this with China. You can have this with India. where power will temporarily look like they're going to overshoot the West, but they're inevitably going to decline. It's going to be through declining birth rate and other situations that will cause stagnation. So in my opinion, so the way I see it, it kind of looks like that an Asian country will never become the sole power because they're inevitably going to stagnate after massive growth.
Yeah, I could see that happening, but I don't think that we're going to be as, at least directly, India is going to be as direct a threat to the West, like in this hypothetical future, in the same way that China is to us now. I mean, because of course, China is directly a threat to the West, but I mean, I feel like if in this, let's say in this post-China world where India, the West, and Russia, I guess by default, come out quote unquote on top, with Russia, I guess, kind of slipping back to the sidelines. Of course, I think that's really the only future Russia has. That's the most stable future Russia has. But either way, let's say in this post-China world, I don't, like I said, I don't see India becoming particularly confrontational with the West. But I do see it maybe trying to, like, where its interests are concerned, maybe trying to destabilize some areas here and there. But I don't think there's ever going to be a war between the West and India, at least not within the next few hundred years.
I was gonna say, like, you know how, like, in European countries they kind of call India Asia.
Yeah, no, they call, like, in Britain, I know.
Yeah.
They call like China, like the Chinese and Japanese, they call them Orientals, and then they call like Pakistanis and Indians Asians.
Yeah, so like from a Western perspective, from American perspective, that's a little bit weird because, like, I never made sense of why you would call India Asia when its entire geopolitical history has been in context of like Persia and Greece.
Yeah.
Like India has always been a Western country.
I mean, I get what you mean. I wouldn't say Western, but it's always had more contact and trade and influence with the West. Whereas China is a very insular culture that developed on its own without any contact with outside cultures.
Yeah. But you know, like as an
like
example,
Mesoamerica, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, like India has amongst the many Hindu gods, Des Peter, the old way of saying Zeus, like the Jupiter, basically. Like the root words for almost every Western pagan god comes from India.
Yeah. I mean, is it in Indo-European, the Aryans?
Yeah. Like, and so you have to realize that, like, most of European paganism comes from India.
It doesn't come from India. They all come from the Caucasus, and then they spread during the Aryan. Because
I'll say that all Europeans are at least 20% Indian, genetically speaking.
Or it's not so much that Europeans are descended from the Indians. It's more so the Europeans and the Indians are descended from a common ancestor. Kind of like how we aren't descended from monkeys.
But
guess monkeys and humans have a common ancestor. That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess
the Aryans, Indo-Europeans.
Yeah, I guess what I'm going with is that, like, linguistically, religiously, economically, culturally, and historically, India is in the European theater of those topics.
Yeah, I'd say you sort of have like a meta civilization encompassing all of Eurasia all of Eurasia and North Africa, with an exception of China and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, and then also interesting religiously too, and you even see some, at least in terms of, in a way, Hinduism shares half in common with. I mean, this is a very reductive way of saying it, but shares like half in common with the ancient Greco-Roman religion, especially how the Greco-Roman concept of virtue is very similar to their concept of dharma. And then the other half of it very Catholic in some ways, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but then again, a lot of that also could be because, maybe not necessarily, it's not a good way to say Catholic, but maybe also because, maybe it's better to say that could be sort of the common Aristotelian way of looking at the world, the sort of Greco-Roman because I know a lot of Christian theology was inspired by the metaphysical frameworks laid out by the Hellenic philosophers.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I do think Russia, India, and I think this goes back. I was sort of saying this earlier. Russia, India, and the West definitely have a lot more culturally in common, just inherently speaking, not necessarily even because of exchange, but just in terms of worldviews, than any of them have to do with China.
Yeah. I'm getting pretty sleepy, so I think I'm gonna head out.
All right. Do you think we should probably just end here, guys?
Maybe. I do have one thing I kind of want to mention about China.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I feel like if there is ever going to be I feel like the Cold War with China could inevitably turn into a front we wouldn't expect. I actually see it turning into more of a China and they're sort of like African puppets versus.
Oh yeah, no. East Africa is basically, with the exception of Kenya and Somalia, but that's because Somalia is basically just an occupied state of the U.S. But most of East Africa, and unfortunately Ethiopia, has become one as well. They're just all vassal states of China at this point. Anyway,
China's really the only independent country left in the region.
Yeah, that is very true. And then I see as Egypt continues to fall apart, I think it's possible that you might see a rise in influence with Ethiopia, and Ethiopia could potentially, at least hegemonically speaking, overtake Egypt.
They have a fundamental problem with their IQ.
Egypt?
No, Ethiopia.
How so? Well, we're not going to get into that. But no, the Ethiopia. Have you seen those fucking churches?
Ethiopia's.
I mean, the Coptics.
Yeah. Like in Ethiopia's ancestor culture has great wisdom, and I freaking love reading Ethiopian religious texts because they are fever dream wanderlusts for stuff.
Book of Enoch is canon for in the Coptic.
Yep.
Coptic text. I think that's pretty base. That is pretty base.
We should never to be honest, we never should have let the Ethiopian Empire just fall to communism so easily.
Enoch is one of my favorite Ethiopian texts. Absolutely 5 out of 5 stars. But nonetheless, those works of culture and renown were primarily a product of a very isolated culture group. By and large, the average Ethiopian is unfortunately a peasant, and has no capacity to advance to the first world status. They are basically Japan pre-industrialization, and unless they can find a way to rapidly industrialize the same way Japan did, they're stuck in their spot. And I do think like Japan.
That's why they're looking to China. That's probably why they're looking to China.
Well, Japan didn't.
Japan looked to the west. Japan looked to the west, and then looked to the east. Then their soldiers looked to the east.
Yeah.
I mean, their soldiers looked. No. Their soldiers looked to the west, aka to the east, whereas Japan looked so far to the east that they were looking to the west. Because it was America.
You bring up the warrior caste, and this is a really good point. Like in Japan, most of Japan was like a bunch of low IQ, like 8-men peasants with a highly sophisticated. The peasants were not smart, but they had a highly sophisticated samurai class who were very well educated, very
took their guns.
What?
Who tried to take the guns?
Yeah, they did all kinds of cool stuff, and then basically what happened is that they all became industrialists pretty quickly and became the Zabatu, I think they call it. I forget the name of it. Like the corporate, basically like all the children of samurai became these like industrialists in like the early 1900s and essentially transformed Japan from this like island peasant state to one of the world's most sophisticated economies within like a decade or two. Ethiopia could do that too, but you need that like warrior caste to do it. You're not gonna get it done with the diplomats. You're not gonna get it done with the education system. You can only get it done by the warrior caste. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Ethiopia decides to like build a dam and say "fuck you, Egypt," and then the warrior caste takes over.
They're gonna do that. They're totally gonna do that.
Yeah. In which case, Ethiopia stands to become a kind of like brother nation to India, and the Indian Ocean becomes the new center of global political strife, which would be really cool because, like, in the Indian Ocean is very under thought of in terms of like its political allegiances. Just another example, like, did you know that the native population of Madagascar come from Taiwan? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're Taiwanese immigrants who, how like the Taiwanese, the Polynesians, like all the way in Hawaii and stuff like that. Same population group. They're just that good of a sailor group. They just sailed that far.
Another interesting thing I just wanted to bring up.
By the way, your mic just got like 10,000 times better.
Yeah, I know. But another interesting thing is how similar Polynesian mythology is to Greek mythology.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's so much as there was sort of some kind of diffusion somewhere way back when, or if that's more like there are just like deeper mythological truths or something. Because I mean, if you look at Prometheus and Maui, basically the same god.
You would be interested to know that the Greeks believed their gods came from the Indian Ocean, some area in the Indian Ocean. In what's that, Panchaea? Like Panchaea, the island, was somewhere in the Indian Ocean. So maybe, who knows? Yeah. But it is important to recognize like the sheer complexity of the Indian Ocean. You have India, you have Madagascar, you have Ethiopia as like the three main like old powers, and one of them has already industrialized. And then on the east end, you have like Indonesia, Australia, and a lot of areas over there. That area is so under considered for economic like power. If they were to like, what?
Continue what you're saying.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say we should bring up, at least in the last few minutes, Australia.
Yeah, Australia is the backup save file for British history.
Well, that, but then also it's you see and I'm generally pretty pro-immigration, at least when it comes to like the Americas, but with Australia, I think it's kind of a Faustian bargain to allow the levels of Chinese immigration that they have lately. Yeah, because at this point it's almost like a silent conquest.
Australia will inevitably be this kind of weird. Like when Rome was falling, somehow Romania happened.
Oh yeah, no, that was more because of the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah, but like Romania.
I mean, the Byzantines called themselves Romanians. That was
but Romania and Romanians were Latin speaking, and they're just this bizarre group of Latin speakers in the middle of fuck all nowhere. I think Australia is gonna end up being that, like this bizarre group of like old English speakers, while the rest of the world goes like burning. And I do see Australia obviously becoming like a vassal state to the Chinese, but I don't think that's a bad thing in the long run.
How so?
Because the CCP is not a long-term solution; it will collapse, and whatever comes after,
just like every Chinese administrative government does.
Whatever comes after the CCP will have a very strong Anglo like thread in it from Hong Kong, which will with Australia form a kind of like honest to God, it's a backup of Western civilization for where Europe collapses. like the westernized areas of like Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, those like remnants of the British Empire will become a kind of like resurrected power one day.
That's interesting. That's something I've never really thought of. But
in a century or two, when China's long gone, whatever rebuilds in Hong Kong, because it's not going to rebuild in Beijing. Beijing will be a burning shithole. Whatever rebuilds in the Kanto region, the south, that becomes the next Chinese empire, will be oriented with a face towards India, England, and Australia. Yeah. Well, that Chinese nation state, whatever it will be the most powerful nation on earth.
But do you really think China is going to become a nation state, or do you think it might sort of fracture into warring states again?
It will. Yeah. I'm talking about after that warring states.
Okay.
If China were to break apart into warring states today, I'd hedge my bets on the Kanto, Taiwanese area, although the Taiwanese speak Mandarin, but whatever. Like I'd hedge my bets on South China because it's highly anglicized. It's highly its face is towards the west. It's very advanced, whereas the rest of China is just like either primitive or like obsessed with Mao cults. Who cares about them? in like 150 years, when the warring states are over, Hong Kong will probably be the capital, the next Chinese state. It'll probably have India and Australia as its best friends. And while Europe's burning and Russia's gone and America's in its own civil war era, like broken state, you'll find that future Chinese state will probably be the strongest and most enduring state in the world at the time. And it will be a glorious like English and Chinese speaking state of very good power. Probably won't be Christian, unfortunately, but whatever.
Yeah. Either way.
Sorry for rambling so much.
But in terms of Russia and China, I guess we'll move on. Not quite to final thoughts, but pre-final thoughts. Just want to ask each of you, starting with Grayson, what are your predictions with sort of the moves China and Russia will make respectively? I guess, well, I'll say within the next year or so, because I mean, there's even been talks about simultaneous invasions of both Taiwan and Ukraine. I don't see that really as I feel like that's a little too bombastic and
the next year. I don't know what will happen in the next year. Also, because here's the thing, China is a nation in rise, so they need all the time they can get. Russia's a nation in decline, so they need to do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's another big divide between them. That's why they're never going to do any simultaneous attacks.
Okay, and what about you, Cringe Volker?
I would say that, like you said, Russia's in decline. China, I would actually say China's starting to enter decline, but not yet.
I would say, I would say China's not particularly sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, if you talk to anyone from there, you will know, like anyone who is not afraid of going to jail, they'll say, the trains used to run on time before Xi. But I think that Russia will act first because they're desperate, and then China will act around the same time because they want to make their mark. And the United States, like I said, I'm pretty sure I don't know if it's organized. It might just be out of convenience, but it makes a lot of sense that China would take Taiwan immediately after Russia intervenes in Ukraine, because it would force the U.S. to pick one. It can't do both. It's just,
I'd say Taiwan easily.
On a geopolitical sense, you're right, but on a personal family sense, Biden's got a lot more invested in Ukraine.
That is very true.
I hate to be rank of punditry on that one, but it's true.
Yeah. I mean, either way, though, let's move on to just final thoughts in general with regards to the overall topic. And yes, you can incorporate the George Floyd and Matt Gaetzegate in here as well. However, I'd like to mostly pertain it to China and Russia, but we'll start with Grayson. So just it takes on the 3/4 if you want to incorporate the Alex Jones thing here too. But either way, Grayson, what are your final thoughts?
I don't really have any final thoughts. I just think the rest of the video pretty much speaks about my thoughts on the topic. So I guess I'll just thank you for having me on.
All right, and Cringe Volker, what are your final thoughts? I'll let you go on one final rant.
Sorry for ranting so much this show.
No. It's all good.
I'm very sleepy, and as I get sleepy, I start ranting.
I think that you might find there are forces in this country. There are foreign acting forces in the United States, which I do think act in times like the Floyd case to fan some flames. It would make sense to me if Chinese assets would fan the flames when the Floyd case comes down, to keep the U.S. hurtled into domestic affairs so that they could have more freedom on international affairs.
I'm pretty convinced at least some of the riots during the initial events last summer were done by Chinese assets. The burning of records at several Chinese embassies where these riots were happening is suggestive to me of interference. It's very curious which cities had dumpsters on fire in front of their Chinese embassies.
Okay, and what are the main conversation in general? Just Russia and China. Just final thoughts on that aspect of the conversation.
Well, as a Russian myself, I'm gonna be preferential to Russia's eternal glory. I wouldn't be. I think that Westerners need to pay more attention to Eastern Russia. It's more developed than you think. The cities are bigger than you think, and their resources are richer than you think. That's and the desire, perhaps, for one day independence might be a little bit more than subtlety in some areas.
Okay. So, anyway, on that note, thank you everybody for tuning in this evening to the Political Pigpen, episode 19. Thank you. I mean, I know we had to have our other two guests dropped out early. Sorry for keeping you cringe Volker, because I know you're really tired. But to you two, thank you, Grayson. Thank you, cringe Volker, for coming on this evening. I think it was a pretty good conversation. And to the audience out there, please be sure to like, subscribe, and as I always say, I think the bell does something too. I really don't know much about the bell, but apparently it's a good thing to press. And I will end by saying, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet.